Okay, so let's have a look at this next syllabus dot point, which is the changing relationship of regional centres and the demise of the small town. So if we think about Australia, we've got lots of these small little towns that you might have seen when you've been travelling out west through the country, and we know that many of them are becoming ghost towns. So why is this so? Many of your very, very small towns that thrived 100 years ago and now only have maybe a couple hundred people, if that. So what's the reason for this decline of these small towns and the actual growth of our larger regional centres? So if you think about it, it's, I guess, logical. In a time where obviously the economy is very important, you've got these small towns just not being able to cope and survive. You might have heard many stories of small businesses that are just not able to survive, let alone flourish in these tough economic times. So let's have a look at this. So essentially you've got push and pull factors. What is pushing people away from these small towns and what's drawing to them larger regional centres or your large cities? So this is not only, of course, occurring in Australia, but internationally. But let's look at Australia and more specifically New South Wales for some examples here. So what have we got this first point? So cities form because they enable collaboration. So obviously between people, between businesses. So obviously when the space between these two things is limited, that's going to lower your cost. It might lower your cost for delivery. It might mean that you're able to exchange goods and ideas a little easier. So we've got a statement here. So cities enable us to work and play together, and their success depends on the demand for physical connection. So obviously being close to one another. So as we can see here, cities support greater labour specialisation as individuals can move easily between jobs. So you might see that relevant there. So this economy of scale, it's very difficult for lots of businesses, maybe similar businesses, to operate in a small town. It's about demand and supply. When there's limited demand, obviously the supply is going to dry up, and it might mean that the costs for a business just mightn't be worth the continual operation. So let's have a look at the next one here. So we've got centralisation of business services in a relatively small number of world cities. So we've got world cities becoming more and more dominant. We know this. We've got increased migration to these large cities, but also we've got the growth of our regional areas. So this is obviously the cost and decline of your small towns, so people moving into your regional areas. And that's because maybe the affordability, it might mean that people won't have to travel as far. It might be the pull factors like employment or education, entertainment, those types of things. So one term that's been used to describe this phenomenon is the sponge city effect. So think of a sponge. Obviously when you squeeze a sponge and put a dry sponge into water, it sucks up all that it can. So Bernard Salt, a demographer, has written an article looking at this effect and giving you the example of many examples from New South Wales. So New South Wales is obviously Australia's most populated state, but what we're seeing is a lot of people moving from these very small towns to larger regional areas. So this is an article you can have a read through in your own time, but essentially it's that concept that we looked at. So they're looking at Horsham here, which I think is in Victoria, but the same thing again, we see the decline of these very small towns, people moving to larger regional areas for all types of reasons. So you might want to have a look at this particular video in your own time as well, but it's a useful concept that is a good way of looking at this demise of the small town. So what we see is essentially the three different levels. We've got the capital city, your larger regional area, and then your hinterland, which of course includes your smaller rural towns. Your smaller rural towns and the regional hinterland, they are what is drying up. So take, for example, my parents. They live in Wagga Wagga, which is a large town in, or city, I suppose you could say, in the Riverina. Surrounding Wagga Wagga, there's a lot of small towns that may have flourished in the last century, but what we're seeing is an influx in terms of the population into Wagga Wagga. And we've seen that for some time. Many reasons why people move to a town like that. So New South Wales, the New South Wales government has a number of rural and regional towns rather have banded together under the banner of Evo cities. So let's have a look at what an Evo city is. So Evo cities, essentially, it's a group of New South Wales large regional towns that are banded together to attract people to these areas. So we've got Wagga Wagga, as I mentioned before, Tamworth, Orange, Dubbo, Bathurst, Armidale and Albury. So obviously what this marketing campaign is trying to do is attract people to these areas, typically from capital cities out to the regional areas. But as we can see here with these circles, we will also have a lot of people moving into these areas from surrounding hinterland regions. So as you can see, they've got population size, so Albury a population of 51,000, Wagga a population of 63,000. We can see that they're trying to, I guess, look at the positives, which might be lower median house price as compared with Sydney. So when we wouldn't have Sydney here, but I know that Sydney's median house price is currently over $1 million. So you've got many things that the government's trying to draw you to these larger regional areas. So Evo cities, it's a concept that you might want to refer to, and it's a good way of looking at, okay, what are these larger regional areas? And I've got a handout here which I'll get you to read. I've got a summary and a more in-depth article which is probably gauged a little maybe above year 12, but I think you guys will be capable of reading it. Some really good content, and it's from the regional planning website. Some stats, some data to actually back this up, and this is where it comes to demographics. So in Australia, obviously we're looking at the Australian Bureau of Statistics. So do the numbers back up this notion of the sponge city effect and the decline of the small towns? Bernard Saltz mentioned it, of course, but hey, where's his information? So let's have a look at some data here from the ABS. So this is obviously, as you can read, so looking at the population by remoteness structure. So we've got two periods, so 2007 and 2012. So looking at the change and the increase or decrease. So this is obviously, this is just for New South Wales. So major cities, obviously continuing to grow in size. We've got growth of about 390,000 roughly over the 5-year period. If we look at our inner regional, they're growing as well, and our outer regional probably areas such as Broken Hill and other west of the Divide large towns. So as you can see, cities are growing at almost 8%. Inner regional areas increasing rapidly. A lot of coastal areas are increasing rapidly. We're also seeing a bit of growth in our outer regional areas. What we're seeing is a decline in the number of our remote and very remote. So let's look specifically at some examples. So this is, we've got some examples here. So largest and fastest population declines from 2007 to 2012. So this is not just New South Wales, but also Victoria as well. So you got the we've got Tuggeranong, largest decline, so that would probably be growth of Canberra itself maybe. We're seeing some decline around the Swan Hill region, Broken Hill and Far West, of course your very remote areas, Bourke, Cobar, etc. Your largest declines. So these outer regional areas, your fastest declines, so not just largest but fastest, similar areas, very much regional or remote areas. So I've got the data to back it up. Again, remember back to the push and pull factors, what's drawing people to city areas, and thinking about how this is affecting your larger regional areas as well. You're seeing a growth in regional areas. It's all about the pull factors, what's drawing people to these large regional towns. So if we're talking about this syllabus dot point, refer back to things like the EVO cities, refer back to data and statistics. We're seeing a decline in rural areas, remote towns. Rural towns, we're just seeing a decline in the hinterland regions, keyword, hinterland regions of your regional towns, such as Wagga Wagga, Albury, Tamworth, Orange, etc., and the increase in population of these areas. We're seeing universities such as Charles Sturt University, which has campuses in Wagga Wagga, Albury, a campus in Port Macquarie now. So that's obviously going to attract people. We're seeing actually businesses shifting from capital cities to these large regional centres. There's government incentives there and economic incentives, but of course that's going to attract more investment in these areas, economic growth, and with that the jobs will come and the people will come. So, a bit of an overview of decline of rural towns and the growth of your regional areas.